My voice has never reached you as the whisper you keep straining after. It comes as thunder, deep and rolling, and older than the waters it moves across. Not the private hush you had decided an answer was supposed to feel like. Not a warmth behind the ribs you could hold in the dark. Not some small inward sound a tired heart could catch and keep. You have spent years bracing against that thunder, certain that if it ever broke over you, it would only be to hand down the verdict you have been dreading. It was never that. Right now, as I speak over the very rumble you have feared, stand still inside it long enough to hear what it has been saying to you all along. Here is what I have watched you quietly decide about me: that I went quiet. That somewhere back in these harder months my voice thinned out to nothing and left you talking up at a ceiling. You pray, and the words go up, and nothing you can point to ever comes back down. No sign you could hold in your hand. No answer with your own name folded inside it. So you drew the only conclusion the silence seemed to leave you: that I'd stopped speaking, or worse, that I was speaking to everyone but you. I know the exact shape your prayers have taken lately. Shorter than they used to be. You begin, and somewhere in the middle a heaviness catches up with the words, and they trail off. Why finish a sentence you are half convinced no one is on the other end to receive? The Bible that once felt like a hand laid on your shoulder has started to feel like paper. You still open it. You are not always sure it still opens you. And when the house finally goes still, you have lain there listening. Not even for comfort anymore, just for any small proof that the line between us was still connected at all. Maybe there was one specific thing you asked me for. You remember the exact words you used, how many times you carried them up. The particular ache of watching the days close over the request with no reply. And somewhere in the long quiet afterward you took the asking back, never out loud. You would never say it out loud. But in that private place where a person keeps score, you crossed off the possibility that I was going to answer. You have prayed more carefully ever since. Smaller. You ask for less now, so there is less of you left exposed to the silence. I have watched you shrink the prayer down to protect yourself, and it has grieved me more than the unanswered request ever could. For some of you, the silence has a grave in it. You prayed over a hospital bed or a marriage, or a person who slipped somewhere you could not follow, and the thing you begged for did not come, and my quiet in that season felt less like patience than like a door shut in your face. I'm not going to hand you a tidy explanation for that here. You have been offered enough of those by people who meant well and understood little. I will only tell you this much, and you can hold it as loosely as you need to. My silence over that loss was never my agreement with it. There is grief in me too, over the world as it still is. The quiet was not me consenting to what broke you. It was me being nearer to it and to you than any word could have carried in that hour. Let me name a few of you by the particular silence you are standing in, because the ache is never general. One of you asked for something with everything you had for a long time, and watched the answer never arrive. And the not arriving slowly trained you to expect nothing. Another of you does not fear my silence half so much as my speech. Every time life cracks and something goes wrong, an old reflex flinches. Sure, the trouble is me. Finally getting around to the punishment you have been waiting on. And one of you has simply gone numb to the whole question. You stopped straining to hear a long while back, because straining and catching nothing hurt worse than never straining at all. Different silences, the same held breath underneath every one of them. The same low verdict that heaven has run out of things to say in your direction. But listen to the thing sitting underneath all of it, because you have been asking the wrong question. You keep asking whether I am still speaking. I never stopped. The truer question, the one you have circled for months without landing on, is what you have been listening for. You have been straining after a whisper, a private inward hush, felt somewhere behind the ribs, meant only for you and impossible to mistake. And when it did not arrive in the shape you had pictured, you called the entire sky silent. But my voice was never a whisper you had to go quiet enough to deserve. Read what the scripture actually says about the sound of it. Long before you drew a breath, a man who had stood out under an open sky in a real storm wrote down a line about the voice of God. And I want to place it in your hands now, in the exact words he chose. Psalm 29:3. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. Read it slowly, because every clause of it takes something you have believed and turns it over. The voice of the Lord is over the waters, over them, not drowned beneath them. The waters are the deep, the churn, the very flood you have felt yourself going under in. My voice rides on top of the thing that has been pulling you down. Then here, the middle of it, the God of glory thunders, not the God of fury, glory. And notice how it ends. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters, mighty, wide, more than you could ever hope to shout across. That is not a sound you missed for being too faint. That is not an answer you failed to earn by concentrating hard enough. It has been sounding the entire time. So take the whole weight off the word silence. What you have been calling my silence was never me going quiet. It was you, worn down past feeling, unable to sense a sound that never once depended on your feeling it to begin with. Thunder does not stop being thunder because the one it rolls over has grown too tired to lift his head. My word to my people has been rolling out across the earth for thousands of years, through drought and exile, and every long night that ever swallowed a prayer whole, and it did not fall silent on the particular evenings you could not hear it. The not feeling was never the not speaking. You measured my presence by the strength of your own reception, and then you blamed the weak signal on the one who never for a moment stopped sending it. Let me show you where the rule came from, the one you have been living under without ever writing it down. Somewhere in a season harder than you let anyone see, you needed an answer and did not get the kind you wanted, and out of that, you built yourself a quiet law, that if I were truly near, I would make it felt. A warmth, a certainty, a door swinging open the instant you asked, and when the feeling did not come on schedule, the law did its cruel work and told you I must not be there. No one handed you that rule on a printed page. You drafted it alone, late, in the kind of hour when a frightened heart will sign almost anything that promises to explain the quiet, and you have lived inside it so long that it has stopped feeling like something you built. It feels like plain fact. I am not going to shame you for building it. Nearly everyone assembles some version of it when the answers stay quiet long enough. It was not faithlessness. It was a person trying to survive an uncertainty with no railing anywhere to hold. But hear the gentle thing I am putting to you. That rule has begun to cost you the very nearness it was raised to protect. You have been so busy waiting for a whisper, you could feel that you have walked right past the thunder you could not miss. The word already written, already spoken over you, already sounding, because it refused to arrive in the small, private shape you had decided in advance an answer was permitted to wear. And do not hear me telling you to stop discerning. There is a real difference between a wise heart that weighs a thing and a wounded rule that throws it out before looking. Discernment stays open long enough to actually see. The rule had already returned its verdict before the evidence ever came in. It ruled the sky empty before it finished listening to the sky. I'm not asking you to believe every stray feeling is my voice. I am only asking that you quit reading the absence of a feeling as the proof of my absence. Those two were never the same, though from inside an exhausted heart they can feel identical. Let me go back further still, to where the flinch itself was born, because you have carried the blame for it long enough. Somewhere in your growing up years you learned that a voice getting louder was the sound of trouble arriving, that when the volume rose, someone was about to be found out. Corrected, made small. You learned it early, the way a body learns to duck, well below the level of any decision. And then, without ever choosing to, you carried that flinch upward and laid it over me. So now when my voice comes with any weight to it, The old reflex fires before your faith can get a single word in, and you brace for a raised voice that means what raised voices always meant. But I am not that. I never was. The weight in my voice was never the weight of accusation. Look at the thunder again, and you will not find a threat anywhere inside it, only a nearness too large to arrive quietly. Watch what your body does when the phone rings at an hour it should not, or when someone says the words "we need to talk." Something in you drops and braces before a single fact has even arrived, already certain the news is the blow you have somehow been owed. That bracing is the very reflex you turn on me. You have been living as though existence itself were a raised hand, as though the next loud thing was bound to be the punishment finally catching up with you. It is a brutal way to move through your days, flinching ahead of a strike that keeps not landing. I did not hang the sky over you to be a raised hand. I hung it to carry a voice. Lay your hand flat against your own throat for a moment. Feel the narrow channel there. The small stretch a word has to climb before it ever becomes a sound another person could hear. That is where your prayers are born, in a space hardly wider than your 2 fingers. You have been so certain that a voice made somewhere that small could never carry all the way to a God whose own voice breaks the great cedars and shakes the wild places. But feel the faint warmth of it under your palm. I designed that narrow place. I bent a thundering voice low enough to shape it inside you, and I have never required you to be loud in order to be heard. I lean the whole of myself down toward the smallest sound that ever lifts from beneath your hand. Now let me undo the other fear, the one that flinches. You have braced against my voice as though the moment it broke over you, it would be to condemn you. But look at where that same psalm travels. It opens with the thunder rolling over the deep, splitting the great trees, shaking the wilderness, and then, at the very end, it turns, and the God whose voice does all of that speaks one last thing over his people. He gives them strength, and he blesses them with peace. That was where the thunder was always headed. Not to flatten you, to hand you a strength you could not manufacture, and a peace you had stopped believing was still on offer. The sound you keep ducking is the sound of the one mighty enough to still a storm, choosing to speak calm over you instead of wrath. And when you still cannot make out what I am doing, when the answer, even now, will not fit into a shape your mind can close its hand around, do not read the mystery as my absence. The scripture says I thunder wondrously with my voice, that I do great things beyond your understanding, and both halves of that are mercy. The wonder and the not comprehending arrive together. A God small enough for you to fully explain would be far too small to save you. The rumble you cannot yet decode is not silence. It is a voice larger than your grasp of it, and still, unmistakably, turned toward you. You have mistaken my bigness for my absence more times than you know. When an answer does not come in a size you can quickly hold, you read the delay as a no, or as no one home. But a voice that rolls over the mighty waters does not always answer in the small, immediate way a whisper would. It moves the way large things move, deeper, slower, further beneath the surface than you can see from where you are standing. What you took for me overlooking you was very often me answering on a scale your worry could not yet make out. The largeness was never distance. It was the opposite of distance. It was how much of me was actually bent toward the very thing you were sure I had passed by. You have been holding your ear to the ground, listening for something faint, while the sound you needed was rolling in over your head the whole time. Cup your listening in the wrong direction long enough, and even a voice this size can seem to go missing. It was never that you failed to hear from me. It was that you had settled in advance on what my answer would be, a small, close, private thing, and so you filtered out everything too large to fit that expectation. A whole sky full of sound, and you kept yourself tuned to catch only a murmur. Lift your listening. Let the answer be as big as it has actually been. You have heard thunder reach you before the storm was ever overhead. that long, low roll that arrives while the sky just above you is, for the moment, still. It is the sound of something powerful happening at a distance and coming closer, announcing itself before you can see it. That is nearer to how I have been moving toward you than the sudden crack you keep flinching to avoid. Not a blow out of nowhere. A voice already on its way, rolling ahead of itself, giving you the time to stop bracing and start listening. What sounds far off is not far off because I am gone. It is the sound of a nearness still closing the distance between us. Think of the mountain in the old account, the one that shook and smoked while a whole trembling people stood at its foot. They heard the thunder and were terrified, and they begged for the voice to stop, sure it had come to destroy them. But the thunder on that mountain did not mean I had come down to end them. It meant I had come down at all, that the God of the entire sky had closed the distance and stood near enough to be heard. Their fear read the nearness as a threat. It was the exact opposite. It was the most dangerous thing love ever does. It comes close. There was another day, in another old story, when an enemy came marching against people far too weak to hold the line, and instead of arming them, I answered the advancing army myself, with thunder, one great peal out of heaven that threw the whole attack into confusion. Notice what the people were doing while it happened. They were not shouting back. They were not straining to be strong enough. One man among them was simply making an offering, worshiping, leaving the battle to me. You have worn yourself thin, trying to out-argue every voice that accuses you, trying to be loud enough to drown out the case built against your own worth. You were not built to win that fight by the volume of your own voice. There is a thunder that answers in your place. Stay here with me a moment before we go on. Do not rush ahead to fix anything or settle anything. You have spent so much of your strength performing a composure, you do not feel that even resting inside an unresolved quiet seems unsafe now, as though something might catch up with you the second you stop managing it. Nothing will. Let the silence around you be a room I am already standing in, rather than the proof that I walked out of it. You are not the one holding this together. You never have been. The ones around you have no idea about the quiet you carry. They see someone who shows up, who answers that they are doing fine, in a tone pitched to close the question, rather than open it. They do not hear the prayer that shrinks in your mouth, or the way you have started bracing even at good news, half waiting for the catch. You grew fluent at looking like a person who hears from God with ease, while privately deciding you had been cut off from Him. I have not been fooled by the performance for a single day. I have heard the true sentence under every fine you ever handed anyone, and I have never once confused your exhaustion for a lack of faith. Hear the relief buried in this because it is larger than you think. If my voice were only a whisper, then everything would rest on you, on your stillness, your focus, your ability to hush a racing mind enough to catch a sound the size of a breath. You would be right back to earning, straining to be spiritual enough to deserve an answer. But thunder asks nothing of the one it reaches except that he quit insisting it come as something smaller. You do not have to generate the sound. You do not have to be calm enough to summon it down. You only have to stop disqualifying every form of my nearness that does not match the private hush you had your heart so set on, and notice what that frees you from carrying. You can stop auditing your own stillness, wondering whether you prayed correctly enough, sat quietly enough, believed hard enough to have earned a reply. That whole exhausting ledger can close. The thunder was never scoring your technique. It rolls over the faithful and the frightened alike, over the ones with strong words and the ones with none left, and it asks only that you stop turning from it because it came too large to fit the small shape you were waiting on. You have carried the entire burden of making contact happen. Set it down. I have never been the hard one to reach in this. I have been the one already speaking while you search for the right way to begin. So breathe out for me now, and let this one leave you slower than it came in, longer going out than it was coming in. the way the last of the thunder keeps rolling off across the hills long after the flash is gone. Do not hold it. Holding your breath is what a body does when it is braced for a blow it believes is coming. Letting it go, long and unhurried, is what a body does when it finally trusts that the blow is not coming after all. Let the air run all the way out until your chest is quiet and empty. Feel how nothing struck you in the emptying. The quiet did not swallow you. You breathed out, and the sky did not fall, and I was still here when the breath was gone. And the smallest prayers, the ones you almost did not bother to lift, the single-word ones, the ones that were barely a breath turned upward because you had no strength left for sentences, every one of those reached me whole. You imagined that a real prayer had to be eloquent, sustained, deeply felt, before it could travel the distance. It never did. A God whose voice is thunder is not off somewhere cupping an ear, working to make you out. The faintest sound you make lands square in the middle of a nearness you have not been able to feel. Your quiet was never too quiet for me. It was only ever too quiet for you to believe it counted. Look now at the two things you walked in believing, and watch them both come apart in your hands. The first was that I had gone silent. I had not. You had gone too weary to feel a voice that never needed your feeling it to stay real. The second was that when I finally did speak, it would be to sentence you. It will not. The same voice that shakes the wild places has been rolling out over your life, carrying strength and peace, not a charge against you. You have been standing in a storm you were sure had come to finish you, when the whole time it was the sound of the God of glory refusing to stay far off and quiet while one of his own went under in the dark. Learn the difference between a silence with someone inside it and a silence with no one, because your whole rest turns on it. They can sound identical from the outside, the same quiet house, the same unanswered hour, the same evening, with no visible sign in it. But one of them is a room you are alone in, and the other is a room where someone is sitting with you, close, not needing to fill every quiet with speech to prove that he stayed. You have been treating every silence as the empty kind. Nearly every one of them was the other. The quiet was never the measure of whether I was there. It was only ever the measure of how much of me you were able to feel in it. So carry one small thing out of this and into the ordinary days ahead of you. The next time the sky over your life cracks, when the bad news lands, when the old dread rises and swears to you that the thunder is finally for you, do not brace, do not duck. Turn your face up into it instead. Let your first instinct be not to flinch, but to remember that the sound breaking over you is a voice, and the voice belongs to one who has already told you what it carries. You may not feel the difference the first time you try it, or the 10th, but somewhere further along than the old fear used to let you go, you will notice you have stopped ducking. You will have started listening for a father in the very sound you once ran from. And here is what will change, though not always in the way you keep waiting for. The answers may still come slowly. Some prayers stay unresolved a long while, and I will not lie to you about that, just to hand you a tidier promise. But the thing that has actually been crushing you was never only the waiting. It was the conviction that the waiting meant abandonment, that a quiet sky was an empty one. Take that conviction away, and the same unanswered season becomes a different thing entirely. Not the proof that I am gone. A stretch of road you are walking well within earshot of a voice that has never yet fallen silent, however long it has been since you last felt it break. When you cannot hear me anywhere in your own chest, go back to where the thunder is written down. Open the book to one of the storm psalms and read it out loud, even in a flat voice, even when you feel none of it. Let the words be true in the room, whether or not they are true yet in your chest. You are not trying to work up a feeling. You are standing back under the thunder on purpose, letting a word that does not depend on your mood do the slow work of reaching you. Faith has often looked exactly like that. A tired person saying true things into a quiet room until the quiet stops sounding empty. The feeling may come later, or it may take a while. The word is doing its work either way, the way weather works on stone, whether or not the stone can feel it happening. There is a specific loneliness in believing you have been singled out for the silence, that everyone else seems to hear from me, and you alone got left behind in a quiet room. I want to walk straight into that belief and take it apart. You were not skipped over. You were not the one prayer that failed to land, the single voice too faint to register up here. The signal was never weak on my end of it, and the God who bends a thundering voice low enough to shape the small channel in a person's throat does not then go and lose track of the one small voice he made there. You have been heard the whole time you were certain you were speaking to no one. So, let the old verdict go. The sky was never empty. The thunder was never aimed at you. The quiet you kept reading as, my absence was the quiet of a room I never once left. You had only grown too tired to feel me breathing in it beside you. And the voice you were so sure had given up on speaking to you has been coming for you across this whole dark stretch, over the very waters you felt yourself drowning in, carrying not one syllable of the condemnation you braced for, only strength you did not have on your own, only peace you had stopped expecting, only your own name, said the way it has always been said over you, without anger and without end. You do not have to strain to hear this for it to be true. You do not have to feel the thunder to be standing under it. You only have to quit demanding that my nearness arrive as something smaller than it is, and let the sound that has been moving toward you all this time finally be what it is, a voice and a glad one and near and yours. Rest there. The sky is not silent. It never was. Amen. Before the quiet settles back over you, one honest question. What is the silence you have been reading as my absence? The prayer you sent up so many times you decided no one was on the other end of it. Name it below in a comment, in whatever plain words it arrives in. Something in a person loosens the moment the long-dreaded thing is finally spoken. And if someone you love is sure the sky has gone quiet on them too, share this with them.